I'm Helen Van Wyk, and welcome to my studio.
And welcome to this brush and my other brushes, because this is what I'm going to talk about. This is what I'm going to just be so, I hope, explicit about, because the brush is your painting's handwriting. Look at all the things the brush has to do. It has to make brass shine. It has to make little lines. It has to make a flower look as though it flops. It has to make it look as though the light is hitting just a little thin membrane of a flower. I'm going to show you what brush to use to begin with, what brushes to use to develop the picture with, what brushes to use to paint large areas. It's all about brushes. I hope you will get a lot from it, and I'm going to enjoy doing it. Before I show you how to use the brushes, let me acquaint you with some brush basics. Actually, there are 5 shapes of oil painting brushes. I have made a very rough diagram of them, 4 in color and 1 just in line. The one that's just in line is that way because I never use that brush. This brush is called a Brights. Comes in all sizes, from large to small, as most all the shapes do, because paintings have to be started with a broom and finished with a needle. This brush is a good workhorse brush. It's called a filbert, just like the nut. And it's set flat but is rounded at the end and can be manipulated in any way you want. Whereas the one I just showed you, the Brights, has a particular way it should be handled, and I'll show it to you after I go through the other sizes. This brush, the one that everyone thinks is the one that just could do everything, has a very limited use. It's the little round brush, very nice for your signature, and used primarily just to make dark lines, not light lines. Light lines have to be done differently. So let me give you a few other basic facts about brushes. Brushes are 2 types, bristle type and sable type. We don't use bristle and sable anymore. We use synthetics that emulate these 2 types of brushes. The bristle is like this. It has a flag, a fluffy end where the paint sits. And so each little hair acts as a ruling pen if you handle the bristle type brush properly, in that you flip-flop it. Now the brush is flowing out, and then the brush flows out again. If you do this, but in the process, you're wrecking the end, kind of ruining this fantastic little invention that the end of the brush. The sable type, this is a diagram of each little hair of a sable type brush. It has a point, a belly, and a root, and it's used to cut in shapes. It's used to pile paint on. You already have a brush that will spread paint. Now you need a brush that will pile and shape. And so we use it to appreciate its wonderful chisel-like end that comes as a result of all these tiny little wonderful points all in a row. I always have to laugh because I see so many of these brushes in people's paint boxes, and I have quite a few. I don't know how I end up with them, but they really are. You can't really use it to spread thick paint, because instead of making a line, you end up with a river of thick paint on either side of your stroke. But they do work very nicely for making dark lines, especially if you spin the brush as you go. If you don't spin it, you run out of paint very fast. Spinning it looks more exciting. And I'll show you that in great detail in usage on painting twigs and trees and stems and so on. So this gives you a quick little rendition of what brushes are available to you. And now I'd like to show you how to use them. The most precious part of a brush is its end. And it's used in the painting process. But every picture has to be begun with a drawing in stage. So many beginners take this round brush to do that and make immaculate little lines and draw in. And even this type of line doesn't satisfy them. They say it's too thick. Oh, it is, how am I ever going to make the beautiful shape of, let's say, that tulip over there with that brush? And then, if they do finally get this immaculate drawing that they're after, that they seek out with this round brush, they say, well, now I'm going to wreck the picture by painting it. So that's not the way to start. The beginning of a painting is not a drawing. You draw a drawing, you paint a painting. And so the big drawing in stage is more a matter of making indications of proportion and placement, composition, and the structure of the drawing. So let me show you with one of my older brushes, one that I wouldn't use in the painting process, to show you how I begin. With black and this substantial brush, I make a firm mark, not that little mark, but a firm mark to say that's where I want the uppermost tulip to be, and a firm mark where I want the one on the right, and where I want the lower one to be, where I want the one that's coming at me, and then the one that's coming up here. And so I end up having an instrument that I'm not afraid of pressing hard with to make these strong statements of placement, because it's really the placement of those tulips on that canvas that's part of the painting's charm. And so then this brush is strong enough to say, well, I want that tulip to look as though it's shooting out this way. That is the structure of its shape, not just its outline. And I want that one to look as though it's flowing up in this direction. Many, many lines. Painting is really a result of a visual experience. So you have to put a visual experience onto your canvas to know what to do with it. So contrary to how so many people want to begin, they want to begin with that wonderful brush to make a drawing. A brush that makes strong indications of what you're going to do with paint is a much better way. Oh my goodness, I make so many lines. For instance, this tulip, I would like to make sure that it looks as though it's coming down to an origin here. I would like this one too to look as though it has a nice direction. And this one, I would say, if this is coming this way, that stem would have to do this and maybe disappear back here. This stem is hitting this tulip to make it look as though it's going out a little bit this way, and then finding out where all of this is going. But this is when the painter has the advantage of doing it and fixing it, doing it and fixing it. Painting is always a record of a series of corrections, and you do have an eraser, your painting rag, that can take away some of these disturbing indications that were so necessary in the beginning, but maybe you feel as though you want to not have to deal with them with your paint. Then the big brush. That big brush can initiate the simple beginning of that painting by saying they're light tones against a dark background. I already have started with a dark background, and so this bigger brush could then indicate where the lighter tones are going to be against the darker background. This could be a beginning, and you say, I think I'm going to step back and see if I have it placed right, to see if I have it a interesting composition, and the very beginning of a tulip, because I really want the final look of a tulip to be the last thing I do. Let's activate the information that I've talked about so far, and let me recreate a portion of that painting, the rug and the vase, not the whole thing, just part of it. You'll notice that the rug is not a matter of line. It's dimensional, it's a fold, and so we can't see it in terms of a line. And so we just really have to say, where is that fold going to be? Well, it's going to be here, and then it seems to go in this way, and then it folds again, and wraps it go this way, and then forward. And then the vase is in front of it here. So first we use a big brush to, or where's my drawing brush? Here it is. And the black vase has a center line and a shape that I want to feel. Not draw, but feel. And then the proportion of the little blue ginger jar in relation to it. Now, how could I draw really that drape? It's not a matter of line, so I have to translate that in paint with masses of light and dark. Since we most often work on a light canvas, it's almost practical and automatic that we start with the dark shape. And I would always start around the focal area, not up at the top. But I hope you're visualizing what I'm doing, just that one little section of that picture. And so here, with paint rather thin, with a nice big brush, I'm going to mass in wherever the shadow is. You'll notice I'm not doing that. I'm flip-flopping it. Also, you might be amazed that I'm not going up and down. The up and down shape is so obvious, but the in and out shape is the dimension that I want so much to impart to this mere two-dimensional surface. And so brushwork is often just the opposite of the way you think it should go. Save the final look, the look that you think is so wonderful, save that for the painting process, not for the beginning process. Just so you see what this is going to be, I'm going to mass in. Now, I only thin the paint with turpentine to begin my pictures. It's a very fine painting medium, actually. But I only use it to make the paint go on easier. Many people are medium crazy. They want to know what to mix with the paint. A medium only eases the application of a painting. A painting is not called a medium, it's called a painting. It has to be made of paint. So put the stuff that you mix with your paint in the proper perspective and use it just to make the application of the paint go on without torturing the brush that much. And so now the lighter tone of the drape is put on in big strokes. Adequate coverage. Now, surely you didn't think that I started that drape, that old Dutch rug picture, with the pattern. What came first, or what's most important about it? The fact that it's a rug or that it's a patterned rug? Oh, that it's a rug. So I first have to think in terms of making it a rug with my brush strokes. And I actually patterned it later once I had made all the folds. And now that I have this all filled in, light and dark, I can come down those contrasting tones to blend them together to start to affect the light and shade that comes, that makes subjects look dimensional. We always see the effect of light. So if we paint one source of light, we see strong contrast, which gives us a chance to make wonderful images, wonderful shapes. So, the beginning stages of a picture is always done with big brushes, big, strong, bristle-type brushes, to translate the subject into masses of color that are going to be the foundation for further development. Beginnings. Yes, they're very often laid in and then developed, but sometimes you don't have a chance to do that outdoors. When you paint a sky, you're painting it immediately, as fast as possible. And one of the important things to consider in successful brush technique is progression of application. If I were going to put a cloudy sky in, I have to decide what I'm going to do. Shall I put the clouds in first or the blue sky in first? Well, what's going to be the handiest? Because I will have to overlap the two colors, the light of the sky, of the clouds, and the dark of the blue. So, I've figured out I should put the clouds in first. Before I put the clouds in, I would like to find out where I want them. And so I just indicate what's going to be clouds and what's going to be sky, just with gray. And then the clouds in first, and you'll see why. Because I paint the clouds in the color and tone I see, yellow, ochre, and white, by the way, and never start up here. Always start around the focal point so that the clouds are an assist to the entire picture's impression, and then put the sky in second so that I can cut the sky color into the white or the off-white clouds to shape them. Now, what if I put the blue in first and then put the clouds in? I'd end up with light blue clouds instead of off-white clouds. So, progression of application is a very strong consideration in painting not only large areas, but you'll see in painting anything. The portrait painter is always faced with painting a large area, the background, for instance. So I would like to point out how brushwork can be used to paint an atmospheric background. And it is a version of the overlappage that I used in painting the landscape. For instance, I'm going to paint in an emulation of the color of her background color right in here against her hair, and now, I would like to have that color grade away, getting darker as it comes to the edge of the canvas. That helps to focus the interest right in through here. So, I'm going to move this color further out, further than I really want it. So, the next tone that I use is moved into that color, helping it to blend. Now, I will extend that color further out beyond so that the next tone is painted on top of it. Move that out further so that the next darker value is worked into that wet mixture. Yes, now, of course, you can see that the background on her portrait is much smoother than mine. Mine looks kind of rough, but you have to paint it in and then smooth it out. Never try to paint and smooth at the same time. It's two opposite actions. Painting is very aggressive and positive, and smoothing always blends things away, takes it away. So you almost have to be much more positive and strong about it initially so that it can withstand all the diddling that you're going to put in on top of it. I'm going to show you my most reliable brush technique, and that is of working from the top down. I'll show this to you by doing that little tray that you see in that painting. That little brass ashtray. Notice how I have my brush on my palette, loading it well, the end of the brush, using its chisel-like end shape, and I'm going to start right at the top of that tray, cutting the shape against the background. Of course, I have already prepared the area to know where the tray is going to be and a mass tone, the reliable mass tone. And now I'm painting in the thickness of the flatness of the tray. And I'm going to come down further than I want it, further, because I only am interested in that top shape. Now, that bottom part of what I've just done is going to be corrected with the next tone down. It's a highlight, needs a lot of white, lots of white and color. The brush is loaded incorrectly. I wipe it off on my rag, pick it up, spoon some up, and I have a gob. And I'm going to pile that right there. Always watching the expensive end of the brush. The part I can see, the top part, not what's going on underneath. There's a change of tone on that down plane, which I've now mixing. Not the right tone. Got to put some purple in it. And I don't care how far down that goes either. This is where it's in shadow. Clean the brush off. And now I have another plane, the bottom of the tray, which cuts that down. And as this went up and down, this goes flat, because it's the flat section. I don't care how big that gets, because it's going to be corrected with the next tone down. And so the shape grows per brush stroke. That is corrected with the highlight on the very rim. And again, this is where the brush is taken to the palette, and I scoop up a little bit and pile it on. And correct that section or plane with the next tone down. How else can a brush make magnificent edges? And so that's working from the top down. I rely on it so much, I want to show you it again on the white tulips. If you'll notice, that these tulips are very delicate, very thin membraned, and I'd like to show you how working from the top down can help you out in close quarters, in tiny little places. I'm going to recreate the one that's in the middle. Of course I would do this one before this one because it's further back. Now, from the top down, now I'm going to be working from here down. See the little light tone that you see on the very thickness of the membrane. How can a brush put that on in such a thin way? Well, it can be put on and then cut down. I push it, just push it a little bit. Ooh, the more I push it, the thinner it gets. And that is the interior. Of the tulip. It gets a little lighter in here because the light can pass through. Well, the light is coming from the left, and so this plane over here gets nice and light, very light. I call this part of the painting technique in the thick of it. We're in the thick of it. You've got to paint thickly. Got to load the brush. See how I always make sure that I come back to the palette, mix, wipe, and load so that I can pop it on. Clean. Using this precious edge of the brush to make these sharp. Here is this, there's again a very tiny little lights hitting this petal in here. Cut them down. I have to do that whole petal. Why? Progression of application. It's the petal that's behind the two that are on either side. So even though I like to demonstrate and show you individual brush techniques, they all interlock and are used together. And now I can cut that in front and cut this in. Oh, this one's a dark one. Here, this cuts down here. Constantly going back to the palette to get the right value. This has a little light tone right in there. Don't ever be afraid to do what you see with conviction, because if you don't offer your application some conviction, you'll do it thinly, and then you're going to have to do it again. Doing it again sometimes wrecks the shape. And here is the lovely reflection. Then, of course, this would go in on top of it. So you can see how I can get this very thin edging by working from the top down. And let's see how that works on painting an eye. Working from the top down. Here, this is, you can see a vague image of a face. I would concentrate first on the appearance of the person's forehead. Not worrying too much about anything else about that person except how beautiful his or her forehead is. Covering it well, and then I get down to seeing how the eyebrow fits in relation to the forehead. Then, what is the shape of the lower part of the eyebrow? Not doing it, trying to do with it, painting this way, but fixing it with the next tone down. Fixing this part of it with the nose. And what about that very thin, thin line where the lid rolls back? It's so thin, and it's an indentation. One way to make it an indentation is to paint it and then make the lid jump in front of it. Then the eye itself. How the eye connects to the nose can be done with the nose. The iris itself. The white of the eye, only seen here because there's a shadow from the upper lid. Have you ever seen paintings where the eyelid looks moist? A little bit of a very thin highlight hitting where the lid is, or the eye is swimming in moisture. And then the thickness of the lower lid cuts that down. Boy, it really gives you a chance to examine each feature of that person's eye. And when you get down here, you fix this with, well, the color is, I reckon the color, but the color right now isn't as important to talk to you about as the procedure. Then you correct that with the first bag. And what better way to carefully observe, which is what painting is all about. If you can see it, you can do it. You have to know what to look for, and you can look at shapes from the top down and execute them very efficiently with a brush. A painter has to model and blend a lot, model solidity and blend colors. So let me show you how I do that. Notice the two oranges, how there's a cast shadow from one orange onto the other with an interesting, lovely edge, and also the oranges look dimensional. I think you probably recognize that those slices were done from the top down. But let me show you how I model and blend. So now with a bigger brush, and this is the bristle type, well loaded, I'm going to paint in where there's going to be a cast shadow from this little copper pot. Paint in where I see the light. Then I'm going to darken that color a little bit just before it falls into shadow. This is the turning edge. And then really put in the shadow with a darker tone. And as you've all learned in my books on color, the complementary color, purple. There. Okay, now your problem is, here's the cast shadow from the little dot on here. And that looks pretty funny. But we do have to establish the shape and we have to establish the color. So now that it's painted in, I take a brush and move the two colors together. half the brush on one side, half the brush on the other, and I don't pick the brush up, because if I pick the brush up, I'll slop that color onto here. So I just move it together. Now, if you want to try this, it's going to be very awkward at first, but don't give up. You really have to practice it. It's just like hitting a golf ball. It doesn't happen perfectly the first time. Never does. So once these two colors have been toothed or teethed together, then they can be smoothed out. Blended and smoothed. Blended and smoothed. Blended and smoothed. Little blend and smoothed. Little blend, little wiggles and smoothed. Now, if I wanted to add more light on the crock where it's catching a lot of light, I would paint the light in. Actually paint it in and then smooth it in. If I wanted to add some substance into the shadow, I'd actually paint it in and then smooth it in. Paint it in. Wiggle it in. This technique is, in art terms, called cross-hatching. I call it poopsie-doo. This brush technique is called make it, break it, and make it again. You have to say it with a Hungarian accent because I learned it from Roscoe. And as you know, he's Hungarian. He was Hungarian. Now, this is the shiny dark part of that crock, and it gets shiny highlights. And I've seen so often someone try to make it shine by putting in the highlight like that. And it looks like a chicken with a highlight foot walked across it. No, highlights have to be made and broken and made again. Make it, break it, make it. So let me take that off, because I'd like to do them differently. Of course, this one is very tiny. So with this sharp, I put it on, incorporate cutting it down, this one too. Make it, break it, and make it again. The big ones especially, we see these on foreheads. We see them a lot of places. This highlight, I would put it on big, break it down with what it surrounds it. So I put it in boldly. I've just broken it down so that then I can put the highlight on again right in the middle. Yes, the darks. which I always save for last, usually are put in and left alone. It's the lights that need your tender, loving care. When you want someone to recognize an obvious texture, such as the texture of this onion, make sure you save its obvious texture for the last stroking. So this is painting in opposite strokes in layers. Now, I'm going to show you how to paint an onion, but it's exactly the same way I paint hair. If you look at the highlight on Patty's head and hair, she has a head and it's made of hair. So I did the head first and then made the head shine with hair as it seemed to be combed down. Let me show you on an onion, and then you'll know how to paint hair. So let me show you on this red one first. Of course, I always have a mass tone. We learned that right in the beginning, right? That we always have to start out with a mass tone to establish the object's shape and color in relation to its surroundings. So there's the onion. Yes, I want it to look as though it has ridging this way. I will not paint in the onion's color in that direction. I'll go opposite this way, being very demonstrative about the colors, breathing a lot of color, knowing that the next thing I do is going to have to, these colors are going to have to withstand the next thing I'm going to do. So let's see. Let me take this nice sable type brush and now stroke these colors together. Aha. Subtle. But so often textures are subtle. Now let's incorporate, make it. I did break it and make it again. Now that broke it. Now let me put the highlight back on. But this is constantly in putting it on one way and affecting it the other. Let's see how that works on a yellow onion. The highlight, the color you see next to the highlight, the color that the onion is. The color of the shadow, violet, all opposite from the way you want it to appear in the very end. So let's take that brush again, get it clean. This is not done with a dry brush, it's done with a dampened brush but with no paint. And let's see if we can't pull these colors together in an onion-like way. Ah, that one worked. Fun. And so, save the final effect for the final stroke. Alla prima, it's an Italian phrase meaning all at once. We've now just examined 4 basic painting techniques, and let's now orchestrate all of them and see how we can put them to use to paint, let's say, this rose. We'll be using some of them. Now let's go back to the beginning of our meeting and find out that we use a hardy brush to begin the drawing. And the drawing is not its outline. The drawing is the subject's structure or its attitude. And so this is the part of the rose that's facing me, or going the front of it, and then this is the feeling of its side view. Yes, you guessed it. You have to put the background in first. Why? Because if you put the red in first, you'll probably end up having the red bleed into the background color and end up with a pink background. Because there is such an important factor of brush technique, and that is overlappage. Constantly overlapping so that all the paint fits together to make a harmony of color, a harmony of shapes, and a solidity to the subject. So now that I have invaded the background color into the shape of the flower, I can now start to feel how the petals encounter the background, making it fuzzy or sharp, depending on how I want the petal to appear. Right here, that part of the rose is not attached to this petal, and so I break the line or lose the line. Now, most anything can be painted if you mass it in a general tone that suggests the object's silhouette. There's another little lost line, feeling that this petal is not attached to this petal. So in its mass tone, just in the first application of one overall color, you might say, so already it looks like a rose? And so now, with a nice thick glob to refer to on the palette, I'm going to now see where the light hits this rose to not only make it rose-like, but to dimensionalize it, to make it look as though there's more to it than just a silhouette. And pick out the tones that are strategic. Especially the little tone that we see that's forming the center. So the mass tone serves to make the silhouette. The lights help dimensionalize it, as do the shadows. And I would suggest, when painting flowers, mass it in and always add the lights in first. Save the darks for last. So it doesn't get too dark or too muddy. Although, if you spoon your paint on with a good brush, it never gets muddy. Twist the brush. It gives a little bit more life to the way the paint looks. Now, let's do this on another flower, a white daisy. Well, in this particular case, the flower goes in first because its delicateness of color oh boy, getting big. It's getting almost like a zinnia. Oh, why don't I make it a zinnia? Then that's corrected, or you can correct it with its background. always realize that most all shapes have to be initiated with a mass tone that is a beautiful shape in relation to a very acceptable background color. This is a time to really work at it and say, yes, I like it this way. You know, if you have a funny looking shape to begin with, adding lighter light and darker dark to it's just going to make the funny shape funnier. So now, the light again coming this way, the light would hit on this petal, this petal, this petal, this petal, this petal. Again, I'm twisting the brush. It lives better. And here, where the light hits here. Change a color where it has a center. The center casts a dark. Always make the stem relate to the center. And so, you can paint many flowers by massing it in a general tone and adding a light and a dark. Let me show you another way to approach painting something. I painted the rose by massing it in a general tone and adding light and dark. Yes, that's alla prima. Another version alla prima is to use two tones to mass in a shape. And an apple is a good example. Let me show you. Here I've indicated with the composition. I could say, well, here is the general overall shape of the apple. And instead of one mass tone, I have to put two tones. The color of the apple itself, only where I see the color, and that is where the light strikes. This is the way portraits are done, because the difference between where the light strikes and where the light doesn't strike is such a radically different tonality that it has to be done that way right from the beginning. And so here is where I see a shadow. Radically different, yes. Much darker. And a little bit of different color in between. Let's go back. Remember what that little poopsie-doo stroke could do? Blend the colors together. Also, remember when I said you have to think about progression of application. Make sure you think about how one color encounters another. I left a spot there and I left a spot there to make bigger applications of yellow so I could move the red against it. The overlappage situation. And remember I said that it's very important to use a big brush to fill in large areas and always establish an object in its correct tonal surroundings. I'm going a little bit backwards. How about the highlight on this apple? Put it in bigger than it is. Cut it down. Maybe in cutting it down, you lose it completely. So you have to make it, break it, and make it again. Highlight. Spoon feed your baby. Make sure your brush is loaded, is really loaded. That's what makes the brush work. Also, remember I said some finger work is surely something that we resort to. If you know what you're doing, you can do it with a broomstick or your finger, and then little tiny things. Little tiny light things are not done with a thin little round brush. It's done with a brush with a razor sharp edge so that you can put it on and then move it into place. The rag helps you adjust how the brush is loaded. That's what alla prima is. It's orchestrating all the things that I talked about. Now, I see the liquid dark on its flat plane, and I'm painting that flat. Yep, I get it. And then I see the down plane lighter, and I would paint that up and down. But remember, working from the top down, I cut that down with I made it bigger, purposely, so I could keep slicing it and slicing it until I say, aha, I think I've got the drawing right. What a big glass of wine. Well, after this session, I'm thirsty. And twist the brush. Gives it some action, more powerful than just plopping it. Oops. But I'm very eager to show you that we also have to work in layers. Put it in and influence it. Now, I haven't even gone into glazing and scumbling. It's just alla prima. A wonderful way to express yourself. So, until next time, cheers.